fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is in the house.
I'm in the house. I'll be going outside, preparing for our first snow maybe this week.
Yeah, getting that time of year, hey?
Yeah, it's going to get cold. I got to take it down a little bit of my irrigation system before it freezes up over the winter.
Yeah,
I just want to move out. Move me into the senior living center. No yard, no irrigations, nothing. Just no house.
Serve you coffee and dinner every day. And
just let me play with my belly button and clip my toenails. That's all I care about.
Yeah, sit on the deck and... Yeah, that would be interesting. You ready for Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving's coming close, eh?
We've heard that, yes. We're having a small part of it. Any holiday based upon the consumption of food is okay with me.
Yeah.
Halloween, candy, Thanksgiving food, shut the door. I'm a happy guy.
Christmas. So this is where you lose weight over winter.
I vow to start back to working out tomorrow.
Yeah, in January.
Yeah, tomorrow. There's lots of tomorrows, hopefully.
Well, there you go. Well, we can hope that. But now we've got a returning writer, and he's brought his audio narrator with him for his book. It's called Now I'm Here. That's the book. And Jim Provenzano, thank you for coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me, and us, and Tim.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and your narrator is Tim Curran, so thank you for being here, Tim.
I'm very happy to join you.
Well, guys, here we are. Excited. Now I'm Here came out, I believe, in 2018.
Yes.
So you decided to do a narration, an audio version. So what brought you to that, Jim?
I had done 3 others with my debut novel, Pins, and then my romance novel, Every Time I Think of You, and its sequel, Message of Love, with Michael Weatherby, who was excellent. And I thought, well, let's see if I can do another one. And a few years after Now I'm Here was published, I posted on this website called ACX, which is an Audible subsidiary that you can audition and listen to potential narrators and post an excerpt and try them out. And I had a very specific voice in mind and couldn't find it, so I just gave up for a while. And then Tim, whom I've known for, gosh, I think 30-plus years, Tim?
It's almost 30 years, yeah.
Because we knew each other when I was in New York, so that's my litmus test of how long I've known people through journalism circles. And Tim had begun to do lots of narrations, which he can talk about. And he sent an excerpt, and it sounded great. And we only a month ago went through it and decided on the sound of different voices, and he really got it. And he was very accurate and very specific about notes and stuff that I was quite impressed by. And we finished it up and posted it, and now it's sold like 15 copies in 3 days, so I'm happy with that.
No, it's good. And I think for me, Audible's the way to go. I love listening to books rather than reading them. As I get older and I've had cataract surgery and blah, 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 I find that I've gone into it. I've already got a couple hundred, like 200-300 books on Audible, and I'm really getting into it. I listen all the time. Every night I've got them going. So, and narration is important. Man, there's nothing worse than when you're listening to a book and it just isn't, it's just not right, so that's important. That's a good thing that's a really good thing to be part of.
I found that for myself, audiobooks greatly expanded the number of books that I was reading, actually. I was maybe reading 2 books a year, and then I got into audiobooks, and now I'm reading, like 15 books a year, so that's a giant step up for me. It's just something you can do while you're doing other things.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, this is Joe. I've gone to the full audiobook side. I have my own books. Several of them are audiobooks through the ACX platform. Because one of the things you're saying is that you can time shift audiobooks, right? So you can do it while you're mowing. You can do it in the car. When you're reading the script that way, do you ever think about how do you think about the listener when you're reading the book?
I think, and especially this is especially true with Jim's book. I try to think of the listener as a close friend. I'm I try to make it as intimate sounding as I can, and not announcery, not shouty, not declaiming the text or like acting as if I were on a big stage or something. I instead, work very close to the mic and keep my voice kind of low and intimate, a little like this, so that I'm not punching it.
Let's talk about the premise of the book. So people that have never heard of the book or don't know what it is, what is the storyline?
It's a love story between a small-town piano prodigy who becomes slightly famous for his piano solo version of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, and another boy in his school who's works on a pumpkin farm that his family owns. So the two meet abruptly. They go to a Queen concert on their first date and realize they like each other more than just friends. And they end up getting separated through two different things, and then reunited in a small town in Ohio. A slightly fictionalized, smaller version of my own upbringing in Ashland, Ohio. I started writing it in the 90s. The first part was just a huge short story when I actually worked on a pumpkin farm in between colleges, when I dropped out of theater at Kent State before going to Ohio State in dance, of all things. I worked for 5 months on a pumpkin farm, and it was very visceral and very lots of sensations and lots of things happened that you wouldn't expect. So then later on, I started a short story about the piano playing, which I played Bohemian Rhapsody for my senior high school piano recital and used to play it at parties because everyone wanted to hear it. And then I realized later on, after these separate stories, that they could be put together, that they were both my experiences, and I loved Queen and saw them in concert, which I described in one of the chapters. And then, like many of my other novels, I just let it sit for a while one took the front burner, the others would sit. And then I heard about, in 2000, I forget when it was, but I heard inkling that there was going to be a Queen biopic about the band. And I thought, well, I better finish this book because I don't want people to think I'm just piggybacking on the film. So we got it out as the film was coming out, which was great timing. All the chapters are a Queen song. Every chapter is titled after a Queen song. I even have a full playlist on my YouTube channel. People can look that up. Like Tim said, it was very intimate. The narrator is based on an actual person who lives through all this and is an admirer of these two characters and tells their story, which is basically what people do, what I do. When you think about people who passed, you're telling their story, and it's an intimate story, even though the narrator, Eric, has a fictional blog. He has fictional recordings of Joshua's piano playing, and he knew them, but he didn't know them at certain points, so he has stories that he makes up a little bit. He dresses them up, but it still has that intimate one-person kind of narration.
Right. And when you did it that way, and you look at Bohemian Rhapsody, is there a meaning behind that song and behind that whole thing that you hope people kind of take away from the book?
Oh, yeah, the sense of tragedy in that classic, song, and the sense of them being rebels by doing a song that was that long and unusual, and how it became a huge hit. I don't go into how it was the renaissance of it being in the Mike Myers film, the dudes, the basement dudes. Anyway, there was a huge resurgence and popularity of that, but having played it, having learned the song obsessively, one of the things that this is about is, Eric mentions right up front, there are boxes of possessions, of memories of the two guys that he tells their story. I lost the handwritten score for my recital. I didn't even make a photocopy. I never tape recorded myself playing the piano when I was studying. And I don't know why that happened. I don't know how it happened, but it did. And I think part of the craving that writers like me have is that when something is lost, you want to recreate it somehow. So that era of the late 70s, early 80s, the AIDS crisis, as well as memories of not nostalgia, but the past that is gone, the objects that are gone, make you, it's like a pearl out of an annoying grain of sand. Like, where is that? Well, I'll write about it instead because I can't find that score.
Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Whenever you say Mike Myers, I always
Wayne's World.
I think of Austin Powers now when you say.
Yeah, but it really is an iconic song, and I do, one of the first chapters that I wrote was I made up a school a school assembly where I would have gotten to play it, because that almost happened as well. One of our music directors knew that I was kind of adept at that. And I wasn't in the stage band, but he almost asked me to do that after he heard. Our stage band director was the husband of my piano teacher. So he happened to be there, and he almost joked about letting me do that at an assembly, which I never did. But it was really weird. Growing up in a very conservative medium small town in Ohio, all the art stuff was free, and after school stuff and plays and the yearbook and all these things were given to us in a very liberal way that all became part of my career. So all the extracurricular activities became so essential. And I didn't know it at the time, but that town I've used many, many times in various ways, moved it around on the map fictionally in Ohio. I was just reading some Stephen King, and he does the same thing with Castle Rock and the prison and everything. He sets things in a place that is familiar to him so he can let go and go wild with the story.
Hey, Jim, when you write your books, and I'm sure like everybody, rest of us authors, you hear the voices of your characters in your head. You know their passions and everything about them. How were you, first of all, were you worried about allowing somebody else to say their voices? And what was your best mechanisms to make sure that Tim didn't screw it up?
Well, I come from a theater background, so I'm comfortable with the collective environment of making something and interpreting a script. Also, Tim was great about adjusting certain things, attributing quotes, clarifying who's talking, the tone, shifting tones in one scene so that we know when someone's upset or not. So I'm comfortable with that collaborative aspect of it, of, quote, letting it go. And there weren't things that I was like, I don't like that, I'll let it go. It was, I like that because that's Tim's interpretation. So that helps a lot.
And thank God for that, because
you were next. Go ahead.
It's I'm just going to jump in. It's very frequently a problem for an audiobook narrator that the author has kind of a fixed idea of what the voices are supposed to be like. I've been mostly lucky so far in having authors who were willing to kind of let go of their preconceptions and let somebody else collaboratively take a shot at it. And I'm always willing to, like, if they have a specific idea, I invite people to send me recordings of famous people or people they know, and I'm not going to do an impression of them. I'm not going to try to mimic them, but it will inform the kind of person that I think they are.
Well, Jim, when I write my characters, I do have something in mind, like, oh, that's Harvey Keitel, or that's, right. You know, do you say to Tim, by the way, the character's name, and then maybe put the actor or name next to it so they have an idea of what's inside your head?
We did that for a few smaller characters that were kind of eccentric. There's a guy named Zeke. Is that his name, Tim? I got it wrong.
Zeph.
Zeph.
Zeke's the other farmhand.
It's the other farmhand, yeah. Too many Z's. He's very specific because he's based on a dead boyfriend that I adored, he wasn't in LA at the time where the chapters are set, but he's very rambunctious and hyper, and he's in a punk band, and I knew exactly how he sounded, but I let Tim do an interpretation that we shifted, and it was great because it was like, yeah, that's it.
And so, Tim, you know, I always think about this. How do you yourself get yourself into these characters that you didn't write, someone else did? Is there some sort of method you have to, because when the writer, like when Jim writes it, he's thinking of the characters, he knows them intimately as he's written the book, but you don't. Like, you can read the book and pick up. But how do you find yourself to get into act it out?
Well, the most important part is to read the book, and not just like read it like a reader would read it, but to read it like an actor would read it and break down the character. Like, imagine their life, their what actors call premise and objective, where they're coming from and what they want, and think about that, and think, especially for the main characters, kind of think obsessively about what in my life, you know, I've gone through that might in some way be like that, and just kind of worry about that, take a lot of notes, and then forget it all. Deliberately drop it out of your head when you start to read the book, because if you start doing that while you're actually performing, you can't perform. So you hope that the residue of having done the work sticks with you.
Do you ever get asked to do an audio version of something and you don't like the book? Come on, tell the truth. We want names. We want names.
Yeah.
I have read books where, because oftentimes you don't actually get the full manuscript until you've agreed to do it. You'll have a chapter or something that you're auditioning with, and I think going forward I'm going to ask to see the full manuscript, because I have gotten books where I got halfway through and realized this wasn't as good as I'd hoped it was, and so that's a bit of a disappointment, but you forge ahead. I'm sort of new to this. I have 4 books now. One of them is nonfiction, 3 fiction books, including Jim's. I've auditioned for more. I have kind of more in the chute, but I am a journalist by trade. I spent 40 years as a reporter, writer, producer, director, doing daily news at CNN and Sirius XM, and also as a documentary producer for like Discovery, History Channel, MTV, and so on. So some of that has involved being on air and using my voice. So I have a trained voice, but the acting part, I'm kind of new to it. Although I was an acting minor in college, so I do have some background in it, and now I'm like dredging up all these memories of my college acting classes.
Yeah. Well, me too. And that's kind of my next question, because in my books, which are international espionage, there's lots of dialects, and they speak different languages sometimes, and I got pay for that, right? It's authenticity to the book. Do you amend your speech to the accent or the dialect or the female male version of as you're acting it out?
For sure. I mean, I think every audiobook narrator does it to some degree or another, but some more, some less. I'm more of the school of trying to reproduce the voice as much as I can without it being distracting, which is a bit of a balancing act, because if you're trying to do a female voice, and you just pitch it up and sound like a girl, or, sort of a stereotyped version of a girl, then it's just very distracting. So I just try to be a girl, be girly, without necessarily altering my voice a great deal, but just being a bit more musical and perhaps in a higher register, and without, and of course, same thing with all the characters, and same thing with accents. I happen to be blessed with kind of an ear for accents, so I don't have a great deal of trouble. I will say, actually, doing Jim's book was a bit of a challenge because, well, you tell him, Jim, it was a very specific accent he had in mind.
Yeah, growing up in Central Ohio, there were a variety of accents going from Cleveland, which is almost Wisconsin-esque, which is its own thing, to Cincinnati, which is its own thing, to the rural areas where they were really more class-based, like British culture. Lower class, working class people would affect a Southern accent, even though they were in the middle of Ohio, and I grew up with that. So there was a classist kind of structure to how people talked. Some would just affect a country accent, even though they were raised in Akron, and others had a different neutral tone. So Mid-Atlantic, I think, is what it's called. Being born in New York City and moving to Ohio when I was a kid, we basically had non-accents, and our parents had still clung to a bit of their New York accent. So I was in the middle of it, and I could hear people. And when I got into high school, when the novel is set, where, you go to parties with a bunch of guys and you're all smoking pot and drinking beer, you affect a more laid-back, not Southern, but a different accent to be cool. Whereas if I was at a student council meeting, I would be talking like I am now, enunciating. So there was a whole variety of accents just in that area, the geographic area which I was actually raised in, as well as the fictional, more southern Ohio, near Columbus version.
I did a lot of accent research, because Jim sort of told me what he just told you, and so I just went on YouTube, and there's also a sort of academic site that catalogs accents English-speaking throughout the English-speaking world. So I'm listening to all kinds of accent samples around Ohio and people on YouTube and how they talk, and trying to kind of take in what it means to have a Southern Ohio accent and what the range of those can be.
Right, as well as the Los Angeles and San Francisco and Texas chapters, in which we have Latino people, we have people who are expatriate, or who aren't from there, so they're not speaking like that. With Zev, we bandied about Val speak, which was actually existing at the time, but I decided not to have him talk that way, so Tim made that adjustment. So it was a lot of fun because it was basically we were doing a theater exercise.
Well, Jim, how do you tag that in the book? How did you tag the accents in the book to your characters so that Tim could? Did you?
I don't like to use a lot of apostrophes and things. It's basically the syntax and the grammar. One of my favorite little things that Joshua says is the what now? And that's a kind of a Southern thing, but it's also just a kind of a colloquialism, the way he says it. There are different phrases, the way people say things wrong, not wrong, structurally wrong, but in their own way to make it seem like an accent, as opposed to doing it all full out like Mark Twain does.
How long does it take you to do that, this whole thing?
When I got up to speed, I was doing roughly a little less than a chapter a day, because as an audiobook narrator, I am the voice and also the engineer and the proofreader and the everything else, the director. So it's fairly involved and takes quite a bit of time. So I was doing, let's say, 3/4 of a chapter a day. And there are how many chapters, Jim?
About 40.
So it took a couple of months, basically, to get through it. A little more than 2 months to do the whole thing myself.
How are you not self-conscious of your own voice? You know what I mean? Like when you listen to yourself, do you think, oh, God, that's terrible? Or
Well, that's how everyone starts, right? The first time you hear your recorded voice played back, you're astonished and horrified. But I spent 10 years, I spent 5 years on the air as a TV reporter in Wyoming. Don't ask.
Somebody was watching? Yeah. Sorry, Wyoming. Sorry, we lost our Wyoming demographic. I apologize.
We like Wyoming.
I love Wyoming.
Wyoming is lovely. I have nothing against
someplace.
Wyoming at all. But so I was on the air in Wyoming. I did the radio in Wyoming, and then I was on the air for 10 years at Sirius XM as the anchor and news director of the LGBT channel they had at the time called OutQ. And so I have heard myself for many, 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 many hours on end talking on air and recorded and played back. So I'm so accustomed to the sound of my own voice recorded that it doesn't, I can actually hear it without going, ah.
Yeah, and I've had people who said, why don't you narrate your own books? And I said, well, if I do a nonfiction memoir, I will, but I want a character. Eric, the narrator of Now I'm Here, is a character, and he's based on a high school friend who played the harp, and he probably knows who he is because we're Facebook friends. But I changed him a little bit, but I've heard my voice many times in performance art videos that I have and stuff, and I'm fine with that as well. But my voice is me, so I don't want to narrate my fictional stuff. Plus, I want to work with other people, and working with Tim was great because we did the OutQ stuff where working in the Bay Area Reporter, he would pick a news story, and I would have to reduce it to a 1 or 2 minute segment, which was, crash editing is always a great skill to have for a writer. And then I would use my announcer voice, not too car salesman, but it was fun because it was like, well, this is a character. I'm playing a news reporter. So that's always a fun exercise, but I'm not going to narrate something unless it's me talking as the character.
Can I ask a question on the relationship between author and proofreader? This is what happened to me, is that my narrator actually became a proofreader and was saying mistakes and was actually finding typos and things. Maybe Jim's books was perfect or it all made sense, but Tim, I'm sure, did you?
Loud laughter off camera.
Santa, Did you find yourself ending up that way, Tim, or is that a service you might have provided?
Inevitably, because the narrator, as a narrator, you have to read every word on the page.
Every word, yes.
Which not even a professional proofreader is actually going to do that, to be honest. Just to out all the proofreaders out there, because I've been one, so I know how it is. So I'm probably the first person to have read every single word since Jim himself wrote them. You inevitably find things, and also, because you're reading it all in one go with a great attention to detail and you're tracking all the characters, you discover all kinds of crazy things that happen. I had one book where two subsidiary characters who kind of disappear for a few chapters and then come back. They came back with completely different names, which this book had been out there for a while too. So I had the unhappy job of explaining to the authors that they had really whiffed it. And that only happened once in Jim's book, where.
Well, there were several typos that Louis Flint Chechi, who was my publisher with Beautiful Dreamer Press, he was a great editor, and also we finished the book together because he was making suggestions, and I would go, "Hey, I want to change chapter 13 completely." And he was very patient about that, but still a few things slipped through. About a dozen typos that hopefully will correct for the future editions. But I really appreciated that with Tim because even I've paid editors and proofreaders for all my books. That's something that some of my fledgling writer pals think that they can just magically throw it up there, and it'll sell and it'll be accurate. It won't be because you'll get stuff wrong. You always will. All my books have errors. I hate when there's a cultural error, like the Pink Floyd concert they have in a barn. It's not the Lord's Prayer; it's Psalm 33.
Psalm 23. Right? Yeah, the lyric is Psalm 23, and Jim Hennett is the Lord's Prayer, which is certainly easy to see how that would happen, but
because I'm not a big Bible reader.
Neither am I, but I happen to know the 23rd Psalm, so
right. And I know the Pink Floyd version for Sheep in the album Animals, which they perform live in the book. That's a complete fantasy chapter that I made up because I always wanted to have that happen. But to make that kind of an error is just embarrassing, but it happens. You do these things.
Yeah, I found myself relying upon my audible narrator, just assuming he was going to be my last line of defense for proofreading because he just did. He says, you're not paying me for this, but here's 8 pages PDF,
I would suggest to all the authors out there who want to get an audiobook version published that if your narrator catches more than a handful of typos, that you pay them a little more because they've earned it.
So let's give out your information so people can find you. So let's start with Jim. Where do people find you? Social media, website, lemonade stand?
Yeah, basically JimProvenzano.com has all the links except Twitter, which I quit a year ago for obvious reasons. But my favorite is actually that people don't know as much about. I've started on Threads. I'm not going to do Blue Sky. I'm done with social media.
Blue Sky, I love it. I don't tell you, Jim. I'm on it.
I know. I'm sure it's great, but Facebook and Instagram and Threads are just enough for me. But also my YouTube channel has trailers for several of my books as well as full playlists for all the music that is either mentioned or chapter titles. I had a lot of fun with commissioning trailers and music scores, usually acoustic versions of the titles, the original songs. So JimProvenzano.com and, the other socials.
Oh, perfect. And Tim, where do people find you?
You can find me principally on Instagram at Tim1Curran, Tim the number 1 Curran, and also on Facebook. My Facebook username is Timothy Curran, all one word. You look that up and it'll go to my page. And TimCurran.com.
The book, Now I'm Here, written by Jim Provenzano and read by Tim Curran. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks so much for
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.